Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ideal Business Podcast. I'm really excited today. I've got quite a remarkable young man, Karl Swanepoel. Really interesting name. I love the name. He's a young entrepreneur that's done a lot. He's pretty much been doing this for the last decade, which is pretty remarkable. Welcome aboard. Nice to be chatting to you, Karl.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Paul.
Fantastic. And we're going to flow with this. It's the first interview I've done on this podcast with a guest, and we're just going to run it. We just want to run it fairly relaxed and conversationally, and just get insights from. I'm really excited to get insights from particularly such a young entrepreneur who's done a lot of stuff around the idea of what's an ideal business. What does it look like? What does it mean to him? What's his understanding of it? So we're just going to flow through that process and see where we go. To start off with, it'd just be great if you can do a bit of an intro of yourself, Karl.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Paul mentioned, I've been in business for about 10 years. Almost everything that I've tried has failed miserably. But I don't see that as a bad thing at all. I think, I used to think that it was a lot worse than I think now. And I think that if you learn from failure, then it's not a bad thing. It's a powerful learning experience. And I think that that's what has now enabled me to about 2 years ago start my current business, Revolancer, which, well, so far is doing very well. We have venture capital backing, which most startups unfortunately don't manage to receive. And I really do think that some of these things that I've achieved more recently have only been possible because for so long I was working with, basically no compensation at all. Most of what I tried didn't go very well, but I learned a huge amount. That was absolutely invaluable. So, yeah, I mean, kind of a quick bit of background is I previously started a web and marketing agency in my local town. I studied AI and robotics at university, and then halfway through my final year, I started Revolancer but right at the start of my journey, I started out as a freelancer. I realized that, the market just wasn't fair to freelancers back then. And then, after the pandemic, I realized that, these large platforms still weren't adapting to help freelancers better when remote work had changed. So, yeah, I decided to start Revolancer.
In your process of that, if I had to say top three things that you didn't, from your perspective, they weren't doing that very well, what would they be? What would be the top three things?
I mean, I think it's hard to come up with three, to be honest. I have a lot more than that. But I mean, then again, a lot of the stuff that I tried was sort of setting up a website. The kind of the biggest loss that I had, because I didn't really have any money to start out. So the biggest loss I had was wasting dozens or potentially even hundreds of hours on something that just never bore any fruit. So that's really not a big deal at all. And it's a good learning experience. Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, that's cool. No, it's good. Thanks for that introduction, Karl. That gives us a bit of a background. Let's everyone understand. What I'd like to sort of kick off with is just like to, in your current business at the moment, and look, the first thing I'd probably break out is the word ideal. We touched on this before, an ideal business. What does that mean to you? Ideal business. What does it mean?
Well, I'd say something that's sustainable, that's helping its customers, achieve what they want to achieve. That the team behind the business is, very motivated, driven, is enjoying what they do as well. I think it's very important that they really see purpose in that. And then ultimately, I think, for myself, there needs to be a degree of work-life balance, which I think when you're starting a business especially can be very hard to attain. And
non-existent at the start, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. But I think it's an important thing, because if you're well rested, you can sort of do 2 hours work in an hour kind of thing. So it all balances out in the end.
Yeah. And do you see, from your perspective, do you see that the business you're running, do you see that do you have an expectation, I guess, that it should actually help you sort of create what your ideal life might look like? Do you have that expectation? Do you go, oh no, you just got to really put it in? And, are you I talk about a journey or a destination sort of guy, if you know what I mean. So a lot of guys in business, we're so driven at stuff and we just go for the destination, right? And the journey's just whatever it takes, So do you, how would you describe yourself? A bit of a journey? You want to enjoy the journey, get a lot out of it, or do you don't really so much mind as long as you're getting to the points where you want to be heading? How would you describe your approach?
Well, I mean, I have very clear goals that I'm working towards, but I think ultimately it has to be more about the journey because, things can always change. It might be that the business doesn't work out and you don't kind of want to look back, over years of work and it just kind of all feels like it was for nothing. So I really enjoy my day-to-day, building great relationships with people, really enjoying the work that I do. And that's kind of what I focus on most of the time. We have those goals that we're working towards, but ultimately it's about the journey.
Yeah, right. So it's a great insight. And you touched on that before. You've had some things that haven't worked for you. And, I do relate to that. I mean, I've been bankrupt a couple of times. I've lost it. It's been not a good place to be, but it does shape your thinking and it does shape it definitely equips. I found it equips you with some skills and some perspectives that you may not otherwise have. And so that perspective, has that come from some of the past experiences that you've had where you went, did you have that, or did you go, all right, I've done that, and did you do a bit of an assessment of stuff that flowed in the past and went, I think this is actually a little bit more important? How did you come to that realization?
Yeah, I mean, I've absolutely learned a lot because I think starting out, I kind of went into business and entrepreneurship for all the wrong cliche reasons, like wanting to have a lot.
like what are they? What are the reasons?
Well, money and image, basically, as a 13-year-old. Right. But then I realized that this is actually
I just want to backpedal on that. Like, as a 13-year-old, right? Obviously, when I was 13, it was a bit of a different world. What creates that? This would be a cool thing to do, because I don't think the word existed. When I was 15, 16, it didn't exist. There was no such thing. It wasn't seen as a career. You didn't go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It's like, it really wasn't anything. There wasn't any. So what was it? Was it family, people you knew, stuff that you saw, social? And what was it that made you go, oh, I really want to do that? That looks really cool, looks really sexy. What was it? What was it that sort of drove you?
Well, I mean, I think like taking a step back, what made me even start thinking that direction was that I really didn't get on with school at all.
Right.
And then I knew that I wanted to do something a bit different. And then I think social media played a role as well. So, seeing other people who are entrepreneurs kind of showing off their life online, probably 99% of it is kind of fabricated. But I didn't know that as a 13-year-old. So, that was what I thought was the ideal.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think that's one of the challenges today. And I think that's why it's important to get definition about what's ideal for us as individuals, because if we're looking externally for what that looks like, is it going to work for you? Is it not going to work for you? And when we're all different, completely different. And I think part of our challenge as creators, which is what you're really doing, you're just constantly creating and innovating. And I always laugh like with some of my management team. They say, well, when does it get normal? I'm like, what? Like, when does it get normal? I said, well, what do you mean normal? Like it calms down and there's not so much chaos. I said, well, probably never. Like it's just the landscape. And I think they understand it's like an expectation set. I find that if your expectations are like, that's the landscape, then you go, okay, well, that's the landscape and we're just going to learn to sort of play with it and live with it, And so have you sort of found that with expectations, both for yourself and your team, having sort of expectations around what it's going to look like? And particularly, you've gone through raising capital, it's pretty tricky and you're getting some money. How have you found that expectation processes both for yourself and your team as your business has been evolving?
I think the environment for most of the rest of the team is actually, relatively speaking, very stable for an early stage startup like we are. But that's very much by design as well, because I understand that not everybody really thrives on this chaos. But for me personally, I realized a long time ago that I think for most people, stress is worse than boredom, but for me, boredom is worse than stress. So I don't care if I'm in an absolutely chaotic environment where everything is really stressful, as long as I don't get bored. Right. And I never get bored doing what I do.
Right. That's actually a really good perspective, So do you create a bit of chaos? Do you think? The reason I say that is one of my first businesses with a good buddy of mine who was in the SAS, right? And it's like the military, the SAS they have in the UK, and we formed this manufacturing business, and like he just loved chaos, because it's all,
Yeah.
and I used to go like, and so he'd be really flat, and when there was chaos, he'd kick into action. It was quite a remarkable thing to watch. And then I realized, I went, wow, that's really interesting. What drives him. I don't think you're out there creating it, but it's pretty exciting, because when everything's like dunka 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 dunk, it can get a bit Groundhog Day like, and it's not that thrilling. And so you just need, and sometimes the danger for us as entrepreneurs is that we need to back off a bit when some other people play with stuff, because you can just keep winding the chaos out and can cause some stuff out there within your, you've obviously got a good level of success in what you're doing now with Revolancer. And I do like doing these. I said 3 things before. What would be 5 tools that you would really, based on your experience and what you've done, what would be 5 tools? And I'll let you decide what a tool is that you think are essential today to build what, like your ideal business or a business that you consider successful and sustainable. What would be 5 tools, and that can be anything. A tool, I'll leave it up to you to decide what they are.
I'll take the definition a bit loose for some of them, but I think the most important one, I think, is networking.
Okay.
I think it is, especially for me, at quite a young age. I'd say the main thing that has contributed to achieving what I have so far has been working with people who have 10, 20, 30, 40 years, doing a certain thing which I haven't done before, such as fundraising, for example.
Capital raising.
And then sitting down, and working with them, because this was my first time ever fundraising was from a VC. And that was only possible because I worked with other people who had done that over and over in the past. So I'd say networking is absolutely key. I'd also say so like good kind of organizational software or procedures around your team are absolutely essential. I wouldn't say I'm someone who's naturally particularly organized, so don't think that I am. But I've seen that it's very important if you work remotely, especially, to have something like we use Notion, for example, to have a piece of software like that where you can keep track of meeting notes, keep track of tasks and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be completely like over the top, but just the basics of kind of notes and task tracking is quite important. I'd say a third one, probably depends where you are in the world, but in the UK it's very important to have a good kind of accounting and payroll software or partners to work with. The good thing is it doesn't have to be particularly expensive either, but what I found is it's much better to have a professional handle it, because I think I probably could do it myself with everything that I've learned over the past 10 years or so, but I wouldn't feel comfortable just purely doing it myself and then signing off on it myself. I'd rather a professional prepare it, I kind of check it over, and then sign off on it. Yeah, I'd say another one is coming back to an online business specifically, but I'd say very important to have a good website and have an online presence. That's something that you can start with next to no money. You can basically even start it for free. And just to give you an example as well, the social media like planning company Buffer, where you can schedule social media posts, they wanted to raise money before they built their software, but obviously no one is going to give them money if they don't prove their software. So what they did is they put together a very simple landing page,
very basic,
for very cheap. And basically it was a fake, it's called a fake door test. So it looked like like the software was ready and you could sign up and you can like click sign up, put in your email address, but it's not actually there. And then they sent that out. They got thousands of people to want to sign up, collect the email address, and then they raised a lot of money.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, often it's such a great strategy, though, when you think about it, because often we can come up with a great idea. Oh, this is a great idea. Might be, might not be. The only people that will know is the marketplace. The marketplace will decide if something's great or not. And that's I've often said that to people. Said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry. Don't build it. Just look like you can do it." What? How's that work? Because with the advent of that, that's exactly what you can do. You can put something up, make it look schwammy. Someone can go in and say, "Oh, sorry, we're oversubscribed," or I don't know. You can say anything at the other end, but you can definitely there's nothing like testing it with the people, with the market, and because you know that yourself, for marketing, like, you can sit around with a whole bunch of people who are experts, but the market will decide. The market decides on all these things, so that's they're great. They're really good points there. They're fantastic, it makes a lot of sense, And do you find, so you've touched on things like networking, which is all about people, procedures, organization, systems, structure, that provides stability, which is really important. Accounting software, it's all about cash. Cash is everything. Cash is king, and then having the ability to have reach and exposure is really good. That's great. They're really good insights there. So I just want to touch a little bit more on your business, Revolancer. Mm-hmm. So how do you think you go about helping your clients? And it'd be good to understand a little bit, who are exactly your clients. I know it's a freelancing approach, but how do you think you go about helping your clients build ideal businesses or ideal life? How do you go about that? Or do you care?
Well, I very much do. The whole reason I started the business, like I mentioned earlier, is to kind of solve the problems that I faced as a freelancer, at age 13 and 14. And I mean, the most important thing for freelancers, first of all, is to find clients. This is based on all kinds of data that we collected and other people too. So, therefore, we have a marketplace where they can access clients. We also give them the ability to kind of showcase their work and to talk with other freelancers as well, which I think is quite key, because you can learn a lot from speaking with other freelancers, just like how I learn a lot from speaking to other entrepreneurs all the time who are far more accomplished than I am, and just giving, allowing them to kind of be a part of that community. Because I think the big issue in the industry at its core has been that a lot of these other large freelancing marketplaces, they prioritize the clients at the expense of the freelancers. Whereas we prioritize the freelancers, and by making a platform that they love to use, we get the best talent pool, and ultimately that's what a client is looking for. So I think that's the way to address that problem. And I think that for a long time, these large platforms that have been around for 15 plus years, most of them, just haven't done it that way.
Yeah, right. That's an interesting say. So you would see as your highest level client are the freelancers. Yeah, that's your
absolutely.
Right. That's a good insight. It makes a lot of sense. I think that. And then when you go through the process, like with freelancers in that sort of that business, the business that they're running, what are some of the key challenges that they have? What are the key challenges? You mentioned, look, getting work. Obviously, that's important. Maybe networking, but when you're in the nitty, I've never done the freelancing gig. So in the freelancing, what are some of the things that they come up constantly as a challenge that your platform could assist in, or things that you believe need to be addressed or need to be improved? What are some of those things? It'd be just interesting to understand that.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously the main thing is finding clients, but a separate issue which links directly back into that is, in order to find new clients and attract them reliably, you need to have a very good track record, and you need to have a large portfolio of case studies of previous client work, and ideally some references and reviews as well. Yeah. But it's very hard to get those, without having that portfolio in the first place. So it's a real chicken and egg problem. Very similar to how a lot of startups face the chicken and egg problem too. So it's very similar in that regard. But, we're actually working on something at the moment that I can't share too much about right now, but it's a way to enable freelancers to essentially help each other, and then also build up their portfolio, so that when it comes to reaching out to clients, they have a much easier time doing so.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. Obviously, you've tapped into that need out there, which is really important for your clients. You seem to have a very good focus on your clients. I'm curious, how did you find your being such a young guy? You must get asked this all the time. How did you find that when people were tapping into you? What was their reaction to you? Did you ever find that a bit challenging, being such a young person in the space that you were?
I think to a degree yes, to a degree no. I'd say, in a lot of, I think probably to a large degree, I was completely oblivious. So, sort of back when I was doing marketing and building websites for people turned me away. In hindsight, I think to a degree it could have been because they don't, I'm like a 16 or 17-year-old trying to bill them to do marketing for them, and they don't want to hear any of that. But I was oblivious to that at the time. But I think on the other side, it's probably helped me too, because I think I remember especially one time when I set up my web and marketing agency, my business partner and I just started going door to door to different sort of businesses. And there was one. Yeah, exactly. Right. And most of them, just turned us away. But I remember there was a guy who owned a restaurant in my local town, and we just walked in, and he just kind of said, wait, come. And then he kind of came back with this long list of stuff that he wanted to contract us to do, like sort of design a bunch of new menus for him, put up a banner like at the cricket club to advertise his business. And I think that, again, in hindsight, he probably kind of liked what we were doing at such a young age and just wanted to help out more than anything.
Give you a go.
Else.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
There can be a bit of a, you've got a bit of an advantage. It's great to see someone, young people just having a go, just pushing it out and having a go. So, you can you can see why people would want to support that, which is a really cool thing to do, What do you see going forward, right? So let's go forward. So what's the car story look like in 5 years' time?
I mean, so good question. I'd say in 5 years' time, I want to have really made an impact on changing this industry for the better, the whole freelancing space. So, be that we are one of the largest players in the market, be it that one of the large players has acquired us, or be it that, the large players have copied us, but in any one of those scenarios, we will have had a positive impact on the freelancing space, which has lacked innovation on the platform side for such a long time.
What about you? What about personally? Because that was a business, and I'm just curious, what do you see yourself getting into? Is there other areas that you want to sort of tap into or do, or things that your personal passions that you'd like to explore further or push?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I studied AI and robotics at university, and I've always had a keen interest in doing something with AI. So, I did quite an interesting major project. In fact, we do some automated moderation at Revolancer, which is based on what I did at university, and I'd like to explore that further, and possibly, turn that into a business at some point as well.
What's your take on it? There's a lot out there at the moment. I'm sort of watching it and going, it's interesting. It just seems to be, there's a bit of fever about this, ChatGPT and then this and that. So what's your take? What's your take on it? Particularly, I guess in the freelancing space, it seems like, there wouldn't be a day where something doesn't pop up. Oh, this is, I've done a landing page, I've created a letter, I've done. So what's your take on this whole AI? How do you think that's going to impact, from your perspective and what's going forward, what do you think? You've done training in it too, so it'd be really interesting to see some of your insights in that area.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of the chat today has been started by ChatGPT. A lot of the conversation in the media about it right now. What I have observed, well, not me personally, but what I have heard and read about is that every maybe 10 or 15 years, people start, deciding that AI is on the brink of taking over. And kind of kick up a big fuss, then kind of realize it doesn't quite hold up to those expectations, and then forget about it again for a while, and then it comes back again. So, well, and I think ChatGPT is perhaps a bit different to what we've seen before, but in some ways it's not so different. I think ultimately the long-term perspective with AI is that the roles humans do will change, but not, the need for them won't go away completely, because I think there has to be that kind of supervision side to it. So, for example, we tried ChatGPT to see if it could write articles for us or social media posts, and to the most part it did absolutely fine, but every now and then it put something weird in there, which wouldn't get approved. So we still need a human to look at it. So maybe a human could now use it to write faster, but it still needs to be looked at, and I mean, one interesting point that I don't know if you know this or not, but the London Underground, that the kind of the subway in London, the trains have been fully autonomous since 1984. I know this isn't quite AI, but with that, there has still been a human driver in every one of those trains who just sits there and kind of presses
Right.
the button to open the doors.
So presses a button to open
And
the doors, but not
yeah,
actually needed. Not actually needed.
they're not needed. The reason they're needed is for insurance and regulatory purposes, because they don't want to just have the train running autonomously, even though it has been running fine.
That's insane, isn't it? You'd think since 84, so that's like almost 50 years. No, 16, 40 years, and they still haven't moved past that. That's really interesting that they've done that over that period of time. I didn't know. I mean, the underground, it's pretty complex. The London Underground is a pretty complex. I remember my first.
But you know,
yeah, sorry.
But I mean, what's even more complex is self-driving cars, right? Because a train is on rails.
Yes,
and people aren't supposed to be walking on the rails, whereas on roads it's much harder. So I don't think, especially in the UK, I don't think that self-driving cars within my lifetime will be allowed. Even if the technology is there, I think it will always be a case of, you need to have a qualified driver supervising it, essentially.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of discussion about it, and I think it's all there at the moment. You can do all these amazing things with it, but yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that. It's funny you say that in your lifetime, because a lot will change. I look back on, when I started Resi, it was 15 years ago, and a lot of the tech and stuff was pretty basic, and in the 15 years, it's so, part of the challenge today is confusion, because there's too much choice. There's actually too much choice. I find that, back in the day, you go, I need a CRM. Okay, well, you got that. Okay, well, let's have a look. Now they're like, and so part of the challenge that we have today, not just in that area, but so many areas, is we've got so much choice, and I think it actually makes it more difficult. I find it makes more. I like to have. I'll use toothpaste as an example, right? I don't go shopping very often, but I use toothpaste. It's toothpaste, but there's
50 different types.
I like that. Yeah, it's toothpaste, So I find that if I've got exclusion criteria, right, I don't use toothpaste that has sodium lauryl sulfate, right? It's a foaming agent, and there's only 4. So what happens is I turn up. It's always on the bottom shelf. See if it's true and so what I find is that in making choices, in making decisions, I just need exclusion criteria that just narrows it, which normally you go, it's counterintuitive, like, oh, you don't want to do that because you're limiting. But today, because we have so much choice, I find that it's really easy, because I go, oh, okay, I'm not taking toothpaste that has that. Okay, there's that one. All right, I'll take that one, And I think it seems to be more, I don't know how you find it, but more important nowadays to have some of the ability to what to say no to, as well as what to say yes to. Do you find the choice thing have you found, over the 10 years you've been, have you found that? Has it just gone like exploded? And how do you grapple with that when you look at making decisions around things in your business?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things have changed quite a lot. I mean, one key thing that I always kind of point to is that when I was starting out, in building websites in like 2013, 2014, probably about 75% plus of the traffic came from desktops and laptops. And then within just a few years, it reversed, to where now, like, probably 80-90% of web traffic comes from mobile phones.
Yeah, right.
So, that was a huge change. So, now kind of when you build websites, you have to design for mobile first.
Yeah.
And right. I don't like that. I mean, obviously it's very convenient to go on a website on your phone, right? But I think you can get so much more out of the experience and work much more effectively on a desktop.
It's true. It's a convenience thing, isn't it? It's really a convenience thing. People just pull it up, and in the moment, we've been trained now in the moment, like right now I can get this. So let me ask you, look, I've really enjoyed the conversation today, Karl. It's been great. It's been really good setting some insights. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, right? One question is, how many hours a week do you work on average right now? On average.
Say probably 50 on average.
Okay. So how many hours a week do you think we should work? Like just forgetting about, and I just in today's age, because I know, this working 40, 50 hours a week, it comes back a long way. But today, what do you think? And you talk to freelancers, you look at your team and stuff. I don't know how you structure, but what do you think is the number of hours that's probably more suitable for us to sort of get a bit more balance. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's all about the quality of work, because you could do something in maybe in half an hour that is so valuable to the organization, that maybe the next month that you work is equivalent to that. So I think it's you should judge it more on output. And I think if you work very effectively, then 40, 50 hours is more than enough. But I think it also depends on circumstances. Sometimes you need to work a lot more. So, but I'd say for me personally, 50 is probably the most, kind of that unless there are other circumstances. But just on a typical week, I'd say 50 hours is probably my top, because the other thing is the more you go beyond that, the less rest you get, the less effective you then start becoming, and it just becomes a bit of a negative spiral. So I really don't believe that, when people say that they work 80, 100-hour weeks, that's particularly effective.
But is that a badge? Do people love having that badge? Like, oh, I'm killing it. I'm so busy. Because you say, I don't know about how you find it. You say, how are you going? Oh, busy. It's like this common busy. Everyone just says busy. Look, I actually have the complete opposite view. I've done those, and you've got to do them at different stages. But when I ask most people, it's really interesting, and I say, well, most people tend to say 2 to 3 days a week. If I said if you could earn the same amount, we don't have a single full-time employee in our business. Right? I won't employ anyone full-time. I don't work full-time. I certainly don't work full-time. Yeah. And so, what we've been able to do is attract people, because we have no offices. We've been set up like this from the beginning. All our team, we've got, offshore staff, we've got a team in Canada, all over the place. Everyone works from home. We have flexible hours. We've done that from the beginning. And one of the things I look for is people that don't want to work full-time, who want to, because it works, and we've actually designed and built our business model around not having people work full-time, because as a business owner, I don't want to work full-time, and we've done the hours. I've done 60, 70, 80, 100 hours, done all that, but I don't think that's sustainable. And so then it gets to a point, if it's good enough for me to have flexibility, to be able to be not location dependent, and to have a couple of days a week during the week to do other things, then it should be good enough for everyone within the team. So it is interesting. And I think I've been doing some looking into that, and there's a trend where people's expectations, I think COVID drove that a little bit, where they went, I was at home and I didn't have to spend 50 hours a week doing, I don't know what I was doing. And so there was a realization that maybe we're not so productive, we just spend time, So yeah, it's I like to find out from people. I go, how many hours a week do you think it is? I mean, it's different stages too. I think different stages of your life. You got family, you got kids, you got this, you got that, you got other things going on. Your pull on your time becomes more intense, and your priorities change, So there's no 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. It's all different, It just changes, But no, that's great. Well, look, Karl, I know you've got to duck off. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining us. And just your Revolancer, REVOLANCER.com. Yeah, that's your business. Yeah. So if you want to check out what Karl's doing, go and check out his website. And really appreciate your time. And thanks for plugging in and being part of the Ideal Business podcast, mate.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me, Paul.
No worries at all. Thanks, mate.